When a narcissistic woman sees you as just an option, the dynamic is subtle, almost deceptively calm on the surface. There is no outright rejection, no clear dismissal. Instead, there is ambiguity. She gives you enough attention to keep you psychologically engaged, but never enough to let you feel secure. This is not accidental. In psychological terms, uncertainty is one of the most effective tools for maintaining control. When the human mind lacks clarity, it fills the gap with hope, self-doubt, and effort. You begin to work harder, explain yourself more, and tolerate behavior you normally wouldn't, because you are trying to earn something that was never meant to be given. At this stage, her warmth appears selectively. One day she is attentive, curious, even intimate. The next, distant or unavailable. This inconsistency keeps your nervous system alert. You are not bonding through mutual trust. You are bonding through intermittent reinforcement. And this is where many intelligent, self-aware people get trapped. They mistake emotional unpredictability for depth, confusion for chemistry, and effort for love. From a deeper psychological perspective, you are not being valued as a whole person. You are being assessed for utility. What do you provide? Attention, validation, stability, resources, emotional labor. As long as you serve a function, you remain in rotation. Commitment would require vulnerability and equality, and that threatens the narcissistic structure. So the future is kept vague. Plans are postponed. Promises are implied, but never anchored. You are close enough to hope, but far enough to remain expendable. What makes this dynamic especially dangerous is that it slowly erodes self-trust. You begin to question your perceptions. You begin to question your perceptions. You wonder if you are asking for too much, feeling too deeply, or misreading signals. In reality, your instincts are responding accurately to a lack of genuine emotional investment. The discomfort you feel is not weakness. It is awareness trying to surface. And here is the reflection to carry forward. Anyone who keeps you uncertain about your place in their life has already answered the question. The moment you choose clarity over confusion, you step out of being an option and back into being an agent of your own worth. When a narcissistic woman believes you are the one she loves, the dynamic no longer feels distant or confusing. It feels intense, consuming, almost magnetic. The silence disappears, but so does your sense of emotional space. Attention becomes constant, not because she has suddenly discovered emotional maturity, but because love, for her, activates fear. And fear is the engine that drives possession. What many mistake for devotion is often anxiety disguised as intimacy. Messages come frequently. Questions become more personal than intrusive. Your time, your energy, your emotional availability are no longer optional. They are expected. This intensity can feel flattering at first. After all, to be chosen after being uncertain feels like validation. But psychologically, what is unfolding is not a meeting of equals. It is an attempt to secure control over perceived source of emotional supply. At this stage, boundaries become a threat. Independence feels like rejection. Your autonomy triggers insecurity, and insecurity demands reassurance. Love, in this structure, is not rooted in mutual growth, but in attachment anxiety. She does not simply want closeness, she wants certainty. And certainty, to the narcissistic psyche, means ownership. The more emotionally significant you become, the more she monitors shifts in your mood, your tone, your attention, not out of empathy, but out of self-protection. Here, the paradox reveals itself. When you were an option, you were neglected. Now that you are the one, you are overwhelmed. The emotional temperature rises, but the relationship does not become safer. It becomes tighter. Passion is mixed with jealousy, admiration with suspicion. You are loved, but conditionally loved as long as you remain predictable, reassuring, and emotionally available. This is often where confusion deepens. You may tell yourself that intensity equals depth, that jealousy equals care, that emotional dependence equals connection. But depth brings calm, not tension. Genuine love expands both people. It does not quietly shrink one to stabilize the other. So the reflection is this: when love feels like pressure rather than peace, it is worth asking who the intensity is truly serving. Because the moment you reclaim your inner balance, you stop being possessed by someone else's fear and start standing firmly in your own psychological ground. There is a crucial distinction that often goes unnoticed until emotional damage has already been done. When you are merely an option, you are tested for endurance. When you are the one she claims to love, you are tested for surrender. These tests are not conscious games in the ordinary sense. They are psychological strategies shaped by insecurity and a deep need for dominance within relationships. As an option, the tests are subtle but relentless. Disrespect appears in small doses, delayed replies, broken plans, emotional coldness at moments when connection would be natural. Each moment is a quiet question posed to your psyche. How much will you tolerate to stay relevant? If you stay, explain, or overcompensate, the answer is recorded. Your resilience becomes a metric, not a virtue. The more you endure, the less she needs to invest. This is how imbalance begins. But when you become the one, the testing changes form. The question is no longer how much neglect you will accept, but how much of yourself you will give up. Your boundaries are slowly challenged. Your independence is reframed as distance. Your need for solitude becomes suspicious. What was once admired, your strength, your individuality, now feels inconvenient. Control replaces curiosity. Love, in this framework, is measured by compliance. Psychologically, both roles serve the same function: securing emotional dominance. The option is destabilized to provoke pursuit. The chosen one is constrained to prevent loss. In one role you chase, in the other you adjust. But in neither are you truly met as an equal. And this is the deeper truth many struggle to accept. The role may change, but the underlying structure remains the same. This is why moving from option to the one often feels less like relief and more like pressure. The emotional contract becomes heavier. You are no longer proving your worth. You are preserving her sense of safety. And that is not intimacy, it is responsibility without reciprocity. So here is the reflection worth holding on to. Any relationship that requires you to shrink, endure, or surrender yourself to maintain connection is asking for too high a price. The moment you stop passing these tests is the moment you stop playing a game that was never designed for your growth and start choosing relationships that honor your full psychological integrity. One of the most revealing aspects of this dynamic is how emotional investment exposes what words never will. When you adjust an option, emotion is rationed. She offers small doses, enough warmth to keep you engaged, enough vulnerability to appear human, but never enough to risk herself. Her emotional presence is strategic. If you pull away, she resurfaces. If you lean in, she retreats. The goal is not connection, it is regulation of distance. Emotion here is a tool, not an offering. But when you become the one she claims to love, something fundamental entirely changes. The emotional restraint collapses. Feelings no longer arrive measured, they spill Jealousy becomes visible. Fear of abandonment surfaces. Admiration intensifies, but so does resentment. This is not because love has matured. It is because emotional attachment has crossed a threshold where control feels necessary for psychological safety. At this stage, the mask begins to slip. You see reactions that seem disproportionate, emotional swings, sudden accusations, dramatic vulnerability. These moments confuse many people because they assume emotional intensity equals authenticity. But psychologically, intensity often signals inner instability. When someone lacks a solid internal sense of self, emotional investment in another person becomes a substitute for inner structure. You are no longer just a partner. You are a stabilizing force. This is where the dynamic quietly reverses. As an option, you are kept uncertain. As the loved one, she becomes uncertain, and uncertainty is unbearable to the narcissistic psyche. So emotion escalates, not to bond with you, but to anchor herself. Love becomes less about shared meaning and more about emotional containment. This is why many people report that the deeper the relationship goes, the heavier it feels. Not because intimacy is dangerous, but because the emotional load is no longer shared. You are carrying not only your feelings, but hers. And the moment you step back, the system destabilizes. Here is the insight worth reflecting on. Emotion that seeks to bind you through pressure rather than understanding is not revealing love. It is revealing fear. The moment you stop mistaking emotional overflow for depth, you reclaim the clarity to choose connection that is grounded, mutual, and psychologically sustainable. At the heart of this contrast lies a quiet illusion, one that determines how you experience your own value. Inside the relationship, when you are treated as an option, your value feels unstable. You are left guessing where you stand, interpreting silence, overanalyzing tone, and filling emotional gaps with effort. This uncertainty is not accidental. It creates a psychological imbalance in which you are always leaning forward, trying to secure something that keeps slipping just out of reach. In that state, your attention feeds her ego without ever challenging it. But when you become the one she claims to love, the illusion changes form. You are no longer made to feel disposable. Instead, you are made to feel responsible. Her emotional world begins to orbit around you. Your presence regulates her mood. Your absence unsettles her. What once felt like being chosen slowly transforms into being needed, and not in a healthy, mutual sense, but in a way that binds you to her internal stability. This is where fear of loss replaces indifference. The option can be replaced easily because little emotional risk was taken. The one she loves, however, represents investment, and investment awakens vulnerability. For someone with a fragile sense of self, vulnerability feels dangerous. So control tightens, expectations increase, emotional reactions become stronger, not because love deepens, but because loss feels intolerable. Many people misinterpret this shift as proof of their importance. They tell themselves, if I mattered less, she wouldn't react so strongly. But intensity does not equal respect. Being needed is not the same as being valued. In fact, the more you are positioned as essential to someone else's emotional equilibrium, the less space there is for your own inner life. This is the hidden cost of becoming the one. You are no longer uncertain, but you are no longer free either. Your role is no longer to chase validation, but to prevent collapse. And that is a burden no relative iron ship should quietly place on one person. So here is the reflection to sit with. True value does not require you to prove yourself, and true love does not require you to hold someone else together. The moment you recognize the difference between being chosen and being depended on, you regain the power to choose relationships that honor both your worth and your freedom. What ultimately brings clarity is the realization that the entire dynamic was never about love in the way most people understand it. Whether you were positioned as an option or elevated to the one, you were participating in the same psychological structure, just from different angles. The roles change, but the game remains intact. And this is often the most difficult truth to accept, because it forces you to let go of the idea that if you had just behaved differently, loved harder, or been more patient, the outcome would have transformed. When you are an option, you feel invisible, yet hopeful. When you are the one she loves, you feel significant, yet burdened. One role starves you of certainty. The other overwhelms you with responsibility. In both cases, the relationship revolves around managing her internal state rather than building something mutual. The axis is always the same: her needs, her fears, her sense of self. Your role is simply adjusted to keep that axis stable. This is where many people remain psychologically trapped. They keep trying to move from one role to the other, believing the next position will finally bring peace. But peace never arrives, because the structure itself is unstable. It is not designed for partnership. It is designed for regulation. And no amount of effort on your part can turn regulation into reciprocity. From a deeper psychological standpoint, this is the moment where awareness becomes power. The moment you see the pattern clearly, you are no longer inside it unconsciously. You stop asking, "How can I be chosen?" and start asking, "Why am I accepting a role that costs me myself?" That question alone shifts the center of gravity back where it belongs, within you. True connection does not require you to compete, perform, or stabilize someone else's inner world. It asks only that you show up as a whole person and that the other can do the same. Anything less may feel intense, dramatic, even meaningful, but it is not love, it is repetition. It is repetition. So here is the closing reflection. The moment you stop trying to win a place in someone else's psychological game, you reclaim your own. And from that place, you no longer seek to be an option or the one. You choose to be free, grounded, and fully aligned with your own worth.